So, a very sad and funny and humorous and interesting narration, Ibn Muslim, in Sahih Muslim as well, is narrated by Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, radiyallahu ta'ala an. He says that one time, I was doing Hajj or Umrah, the narrator forgot what he said, with Ibn Sayyad. And the time came for the caravan to stop. So you know, the caravans go for 5-10 hours, they stop for the night, next morning they'll go. So the time came to stop. And when the caravans basically stopped, everybody ran away from Ibn Sayyad, and I was the one left next to him. Right? So nobody wanted to put his tent next to the tent of Ibn Sayyad. Okay? Everybody goes away, and I found myself next to Ibn Sayyad. فَاسْتَوْحَشْتُ مِنْهُ وَحْشَةً شَدِيدًا. And I became very terrified of him because of the rumors going around about him. This is after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. Still the rumors are there. Abu Sa'id wants nothing to do with the guy. And looking around, he saw I was the only camel there, so he brought his belongings and he sat down next to me. I said to him, "It is so hot over here, maybe it's better for you if you rest in that shade over there. Just get away from me." Okay? So he got the hint, he stood up and he went over there. And eventually some meat came to me. So Ibn Sayyad stood up to share with that meat. So now food has come. And generally speaking, when you're in one caravan, you're going to all share the meal. Okay? Nobody wanted to deliver the meal to him, so they delivered it to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, and Ibn Sayyad wants to now share that meal. So he came and he sat down with me, and he had a glass of milk with him. So he gave me some milk and he said, "Go ahead, take some." So I said, "This milk is warm and I don't like warm milk. And the only reason I didn't want to drink it," this is him saying, "is because I did not want to touch anything he touched." Okay? Who refuses milk in those days? Everybody loves milk. But Ibn Sayyad, he goes, "I don't want it." So Ibn Sayyad said, "Ya Aba Sa'id, how I wish that I could take a rope and tie it on that tree and commit suicide because of what the people say about me." In other words, he knows exactly why Abu Sa'id is not sitting next to him, is not sharing the milk with him, and it's hurting Ibn Sayyad. How I wish that I can take a rope, tie it on that tree, and then commit suicide because of that, because of what the people say about me. Ya Aba Sa'id, don't you know from being from the Ansar what the Prophet ﷺ said? Ya Aba Sa'id, aren't you one of the most knowledgeable people about the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ? Ya Aba Sa'id, look, he is now quizzing him. Don't you know that the Dajjal is a kafir and I am a Muslim? Ya Aba Sa'id, don't you know that the Dajjal shall have no children and I have left my children in Madinah? By the way, these are all signs. Dajjal, we all know he's a kafir. Dajjal shall have no children. And Ibn Sayyad said, "I left my family in Medina. How can I be Dajjal?" Ya Aba Sa'id, don't you know that Dajjal shall not enter Mecca and Medina? And here I am, having left Medina on our way to Mecca. Now he's giving some solid points here, right? How are you going to refute this? Okay. By the way, so another thing about Dajjal, we're going to come to these. One of the signs of Dajjal is he shall not enter Mecca or Medina. And Ibn Sayyad is living in Medina and he's on his way to Mecca. And Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, he continued making these arguments until I was about to have a soft spot for him. Then what happened? Then he said, "Ama wallahi inni la'a'rifuhu wa a'rifu mawlidahu wa ayna huwa al-an." But by Allah, this is Ibn Sayyad saying to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, I know who the Dajjal is. And I know where he shall be born. And I know who his parents are in one version. And I know where he is now. That throws a spanner in all of this. How do you know all of this, O Ibn Sayyad? How do you know all of this? So, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, after having his heart softened, feeling guilty, maybe doing the guy wrong, now for sure his face must have changed when he said it. But I know who he is and I know where he is. All of a sudden the terror comes back to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and he says, may you be cursed, Ya Ibn Sayyad, for what you have done. And he walks away. So Ibn Sayyad is no joke. There was some murkiness about him, about who he was. However, eventually Ibn Sayyad simply disappears. We don't know when he died. The hadith goes that on the day of Harra, he was just disappeared. Nobody knows basically how he died. But clearly Ibn Sayyad was not that Dajjal, because he himself gave all of these signs that Abu Sa'id al-Khudri had to acknowledge. Whether he died a Muslim or not is another issue, because Ibn Sayyad is saying, I am a Muslim and the Dajjal is a kafir. And this has caused a huge controversy amongst the scholars. And Imam al-Dhahabi, in his monumental encyclopedia of the Sahaba, he basically says that he cannot be a Sahabi because, and this is a very interesting point. What is the definition of a Sahabi? A Sahabi is someone whom the Prophet ﷺ interacted with while that person was a Muslim. If the interaction occurred and the person was not a Muslim and later embraced Islam, that person does not become a Sahabi. And of the examples, or the possible examples, is Ibn Sayyad. Ibn Sayyad did not accept Islam in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. If he accepted Islam, and that is an if, we don't know. If he accepted Islam after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, this does not make him a Sahabi, it makes him a Tabi'i. Another interesting twist, not as big of a twist, but it is nonetheless interesting. Another interesting twist is that the son of Ibn Sayyad, became a great scholar. And his name is Umara ibn Sayyaf ibn Sayyad. Right? Ibn Safi ibn Sayyad. So Umara ibn Safi ibn Sayyad. And this same Umara is one of the teachers of Imam Malik, believe it or not. So, and his name is found in the Muwatta and others as a narrator of Hadith. And this is the son of Ibn Sayyad. And he is a narrator of Hadith, and he is a famous narrator of Hadith. And it is said that Imam Malik respected Umara immensely because of his knowledge of Hadith. Okay? So, one of those interesting twists. The bottom line, in the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, there was a cryptic figure who was a minor Dajjal in that time frame. And because he was still a young child, the Prophet ﷺ did not know, is he going to grow up to become that Dajjal or not? And the Prophet ﷺ passes away, and that confusion lingers on in the Sahaba. Some of them still think he is the Dajjal. But we now know that he could not have been that Dajjal. Now it is clear he wasn't that Dajjal, and so you should be aware of that controversy, that Ibn Sayyad was one of the minor Dajjals. Now, did he embrace Islam or not? Allah knows best, but this last phrase that he said to Abu Sa'id al-Khudri really throws a spanner. Means he still had contact with the world of the jinn. And he still has some issues that are un-Islamic. So he dies in murky circumstances, and we leave his affair to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first interesting controversy about Dajjal. There is another one before we get to other hadith. So all of these are interesting things that you should be aware of now. And this is inshallah, this is an advanced series of lectures. Otherwise you will not hear much of this stuff in the English language. Now, the next incident of Dajjal. And you will also find this hadith in Sahih Muslim. Is the famous narration that might seem to indicate that Dajjal is alive and healthy as we speak. And that he is chained up in some exotic island. Maybe in the Bermuda Triangle, Allah knows best. I'm just making that up. What is this hadith? And where do we get it from? This hadith is the famous hadith of Fatima binti Qais, one of the famous sahabiyat. She narrates, and this hadith is in Sahih Muslim, that one day we were sitting in our house when we heard the crier running through the city saying, As-salatu jami'a, as-salatu jami'a. As-salatu jami'a is how the Prophet ﷺ would call the Sahaba to the masjid when there was an issue other than the 5 salawats. The adhan is not given. You have an announcement. come to the musalla, come to the musalla. That's how they would do that. As-salatu jami' simply means come to the musalla. That's what it means now. Even though it technically means come and pray, but the meaning here is come to the masjid. So, Fatima says, I rushed to the masjid to see what was happening, and I prayed with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I was in the first line of the women, right behind the men. In her eagerness to hear what the Prophet ﷺ would say, she was in the first saf of the women behind the men. Point she's trying to say is, I heard directly everything that I'm about to tell you. So, after we finished praying, the Prophet ﷺ went on the minbar and sat down. And he said, let everybody remain where he is. Nobody move. Let everybody remain where he is. Do you know why I called you? They said, Allah and His Messenger know best. He said, I did not call you today to give you an advice or a lecture to cause you to cry or to fear Allah. That's not the reason. A maw'idah, no khatira today. I didn't call you. But rather, I came to tell you what Tamim al-Dari came to inform me. Tamim al-Dari. Who is Tamim al-Dari? I have a lecture about him online very briefly, about one of the, my series about the Sahaba. Tamim al-Dari was one of the few Sahabi who was a Christian and then embraced Islam. The majority of Sahaba were pagans. Very, very few were Jewish or Christian when they embraced Islam. Very few. And of them is Tamim al-Dari. So he's one of those group of Sahaba who was Ahli Kitab, and he embraces Islam, and of them is Tamim al-Dari. And so Tamim al-Dari came to me embracing Islam, and he told me a story that happened to him many, many years ago. Now, Tamim al-Dari is from one of the tribes up north, and those tribes were seafaring tribes. They would ride the ocean. The Quraysh were a non-seafaring tribe. The Quraysh despised the ocean. The Quraysh did not like riding on the ocean. And that's why the Quran is full of references. فَإِذَا رَكِبُوا فِي الْفُلْكِ. The Quraysh did not like the ocean. And few of the Qurayshis rode on the ocean. And that's why when our Prophet ﷺ saw a dream where some of his own Sahaba were riding the oceans, conquering other lands, he laughed and he said, I saw my own ummah shall be riding on the waves like kings, riding horses and steeds, galloping, and they shall be conquering, oceans. And Milhan said, Ya Rasulullah, make dua that I am amongst them. And he said, you are amongst them. And that's why she died in Qubrus, in Cyprus, because the Prophet said, you will be amongst them. So he laughed when he saw his ummah riding the ocean. It was a strange thing for the Quraysh. They did not like. Unlike Tamim al-Dari, they were seafarers. They were people who were involved in navy issues. And so, naval issues, naval expeditions. And so, Tamim al-Dari, he came to embrace Islam. And he came in the 9th year of the Hijrah, and he came to, in those days they sent the delegations to embrace Islam. And when he came, he told the Prophet ﷺ about something that happened to him many, many, many years ago. He said, Ya Rasulullah, let me tell you an interesting story. Let me tell you something that when I was an earlier young man, a Christian, this is what happened to me. So when he told this story, the Prophet ﷺ then called the Sahaba and said, here is Tamim al-Dari, let me tell you what he told me. That's the hadith here, okay? Now, it's a very long hadith, and you will find it. Where will you find it, guys? Online. I gave you the reference right now. Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim, okay? And by the way, I would want you to start getting connected with our traditions. It's a side note here. SubhanAllah, some of us have a fear to touch Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. My dear brothers and sisters, these are our sources. Learn to familiarize. It's not going to bite you. It's not going to bite you. You don't have to have wudu to touch Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. Okay? Purchase these books. Wallahi, your horizons will start broadening. You're going to start feeling a sense of knowledge. Oh, this is what the book says. If you have any questions, come to me, come to any scholar. You will find, inshallah, an answers, no problem. But why are you scared of reading hadith? Why are you scared of getting into the tradition? I'm telling you, Imam Muslim has an entire section about Dajjal, and about Ibn Sayyad, and about all of these hadith. Read all of these, and after this brief explanation of just 20 minutes, you will yourself see, oh my God, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. That's all that's needed. And your iman will grow, and your love for hadith will increase, and your love for the Prophet ﷺ will increase. So I encourage you all, don't be scared by opening up a book. Okay? Don't be scared to open up a chapter and read and see what is going on. And then if you have any questions, ask. But your iman will increase, and also you'll get a sense of knowledge as well. SubhanAllah. Again, all of this is a tangent here, but a lot of times we don't even know why we know, how we know. We don't know where it's found. We don't know. We heard people say, learn your religion from the sources. Is there any harm in that? Learn your religion. Read the Quran. Read the Sunnah. And most importantly, Bukhari and Muslim, they're right there. I strongly encourage you, don't be intimidated by Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. I'm not saying become a scholar. I'm not saying derive. I'm not saying that. Astaghfirullah. I'm not saying open up and become Shaykh al-Islam after 1 hour. But I'm saying you don't lose anything reading. Don't lose anything understanding and then asking when you have any issues. So, this hadith is a long one. It's actually 4 or 5 pages of English. I'm not going to go into all of that. But in a nutshell, you've all heard of it somehow here and there. Most of you, I should have heard of it. And the story goes as follows, that Tamim al-Dari says when he was a younger man, that he was in a ship of around 30 people from the tribe of Judham and Lukham. These are Christian Arab tribes up north, and he was from those tribes. And once a very severe storm came in the ocean, and for 30 days they were lost at sea. After there were 30 days, they were lost at sea. They had no clue where they were until they came to a faraway, ocean that they could not recognize, and they saw an island in the distance. So some of them, Tamim al-Dari and a few of them, took the smaller boat to go get some water, to go get some food. So every large boat has that small boat to go in. So they took that smaller boat to go to that island, and when they landed on that island, they met a very terrifying animal. A beast that could speak to them. A dabba that could speak to them. And we'll mention the dabba when we come to one of the 10 signs. The dabba that could come to them. And this beast was unrecognizable. Like, call him what, Bigfoot or something, Frankenstein, whatever. Not Frankenstein, sorry, scratch that from the record. Bigfoot, not Frankenstein. I guess in our cultural folklore, closer to the Bigfoot. Although the hadith did not describe him. It simply says, a beast that's very hairy. Just nothing but hair, and could speak. And Tamim saw this and his people, and they were terrified. And the beast said, come with me. I'm going to take you to my owner or my master. And they went to this island, and they went to this cave where they saw a man larger than any man they have ever seen. And the man was tied up in a more severe manner than any man they have ever seen. And the man then began to ask a number of questions. And it goes like, 10 questions or so. I'm not going to go into all of them. And they were so terrified, they just responded one after the other. And until in the end, the last question was, of the questions, the Tabariya Sea, is it still there? This well, is it giving water? This land, is it still cultivated? And they answered yes, yes, yes. And always the answer was, a time will come when there shall be no water in that lake. A time will come when this well will be dry. A time will come when this land that you consider to be very beautiful and green will be completely barren. So he's giving predictions in the future. Then he says, that has the Ummi prophet been sent amongst the Arabs? Has that prophet been sent amongst the Arabs? And Tamim al-Dari at this time was a Christian, but he was an Arab. He knows the Prophet has come. So he says, yes, he has been sent. And he has come out from Mecca, and he has settled in Yathrib. Because he didn't call it Medina, because only Muslims called it Medina. For those 10 years when Islam was spreading, Yathrib and Medina were the same name, as you know, the same city. And the Muslims called it Medina. And the Munafiqun and the pagans called it, the old name, Yathrib. And that is why we are not allowed as Muslims to call it Yathrib unless we describe it, that this is the pre-Islamic name. In any case, so, because the Prophet said they call it Yathrib and it is Medina. They call it Yathrib, so we do not call it Yathrib as a name. In any case, so Tamim al-Dari said he has settled in Medina. The Dajjal says, did the Arabs fight him? They say, yes. So he says, who won? They say, sometimes he wins, and sometimes the Arabs wins, meaning the Uhud. Uhud, they say, was a loss, even though Uhud was not a loss. From our perspective, Uhud was a stalemate. It was not a loss, but the Quraysh interpreted it as a loss. Dajjal then said, if there is good in the Arabs, they should follow him. And I will tell you about me. I am the Masīḥ. And it is only a matter of time before I am let loose. And when I am let loose, I shall visit every single city on earth in 40 days, except for Mecca and Madinah, for they are made haram for me. Every time I come to them, the angels will stop me. Then the Prophet ﷺ stopped his lecture, and he began poking on the mimbar, like this to emphasize. And he said, this is tiba, this is tiba, this is tiba. Did I not tell you about the Dajjal? And they said, yes, you did. Now this hadith ends over here. Now, this hadith is the famous hadith of Tamim al-Dari, narrated by one Sahabiyya, Fatima binti Qais. And it is in Sahih Muslim, and its chain appears to be authentic. Now, this hadith has caused a lot of controversy in the ummah. Why and how? Because it throws a spanner in what we seem to know about the Dajjal. Other traditions mention that the Dajjal will come towards the end of times. They mention he shall be born to parents who were childless for many, many years, and they're making dua for a child, and they shall be given a child, and they will not recognize that it is the Dajjal. The hadith that we just mentioned about Hafsa says the Dajjal will come out and appear because of some anger issue. Something happened that made him angry. Whereas this hadith seems to throw all of that to the wind. And the Dajjal is alive and healthy, he's tied up, he knows he's the Dajjal, etc., etc. And because of this leads us to a very deep issue. Is it allowed to problematize hadith based upon the content and not based upon the chain? You understand this question? Is it allowed for scholars, I'm not talking average person, for scholars who understand, hadith scholars, to problematize a hadith because the content seems different? And the vast majority of scholars said no. And for good reason. Because if you open this door, then it will never be shut. If you open this door, then every Tom, Dick and Harry, or I should say Tahir, Dawood and Harun, will come and say, oh, I don't understand this hadith. As we have people in our times, munkiri hadith, as we know, right? You know, I'm not going to mention his, but there are people that deny hadith in our times and whatnot. And we are, alhamdulillah, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And the meaning of Sunni or Ahl Sunnah means what? We follow Sunnah. The term Sunni, what does it mean? We are defined by our clinging to the Sunnah. By definition, anybody who says they're Sunni means what? We're following the Sunnah. Anybody says we don't follow the Sunnah, they are from another firqa. Go ahead and call yourself another firqa. You are no longer mainstream. You are no longer Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So anyway, what was I saying? Is it allowed to problematize hadith based upon the content? The vast majority of scholars said no. A very small handful said yes, with a lot of conditions. And this is not the time to go into that. But one of those conditions, and I like this, one of those conditions is the problematization should not come from your mind or logic or rationality. It should come because it seems to be clashing with other ahadith. You understand this point, right? If the problem seems to come with a clash from within the tradition, that is different than when you say, oh, my mind doesn't understand the hadith. Because if you open this door, then out the window. As Ali radiallahu anhu said, that if the hadith or if the sharia were to be based on my aql, the masah over the socks should be done on the bottom. But I saw with my eyes the Prophet ﷺ do masah on the top. Memorize this, a very beautiful tradition by the way, very beautiful tradition. If our religion were to be based on what I think, on my aql, on my common sense, then when you do masah, where should you do masah? On the bottom. But Ali radiallahu anh said, I saw the Prophet do masah on the top. When it comes to the deen, قال الله قال رسوله سمعنا وأطعنا. Whether we understand or not. But what about if within the deen itself, you have 2-3 hadith that seem to clash? In this case, it's not my mind. We have to now reconcile between this. So, based on this issue, we have some great ulama from the past and from the present. They did problematize this particular hadith. They did problematize this particular hadith. And of them, we have in our times as well, or I should say the generation before us, the famous scholar, the most famous alim of 100 years ago, and that is Sheikh Rashid Rida. Sheikh Rashid Rida. Maybe one day we'll give a lecture about him. Very, very influential alim. And frankly, I'll say something, many of us here today are influenced by him and we don't even know it. His influence was so profound that he had an impact on the global understanding of Islam. And many of us, we don't even know, but we are influenced by him. He was without a doubt the most famous alim of 100 years ago, Rashid Rida. And unfortunately his name is not, there was no alim more famous than him 100 years ago. He died 1935, by the way. So in 1919, every intellectual in the ummah knew him. And he influenced people as diverse as Hassan al-Banna and al-Albani. Both of them, they considered Rashid Rida to be their sheikh, directly, by the way. Look, he influenced men, and including not just him, but anyway, I'm going to my tangent, but even what we now call modernist Islam, progressive Islam, they take, in our American system, again, I don't mind saying this, great thinkers like the Hadhut brothers and whatnot, they, the trends that were there, they were influenced by Rashid Rida as well. Their sheikh was the student of Rashid Rida. The whole anyway, why am I talking about this? Dajjal. My mind goes here and there, I apologize. You guys don't know me yet, but my mind doesn't, it's not, make dua for Sirat al-Mustaqim. I need to be straight here. Where was I? We're talking about Dajjal. And what were we talking about before this? Problematizing, exactly. So Rashid Rida was one of those who said that this hadith doesn't make sense in light of all of these other hadith. And Rashid Rida is a great Sunni alim. He's not one of these, Now another great sheikh as well in our times, my teacher, I studied with him, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Salih al-Uthaymeen, very mainstream, very traditional, very hardcore sheikh who loved hadith. But he said, this hadith, I don't consider it authentic, even if it is in Sahih Muslim. Why? Because it seems to conflict with other ahadith. So in reality, I have to be honest, I am sympathetic to this minority voice. Because it doesn't make sense that the Dajjal is alive and healthy. And it also doesn't make sense that if this incident occurred, only Fatima bint Qais narrates it and the Prophet has called the entire city. Something doesn't seem to be right, and Allah knows best. Our Shaykh would say, my heart is at unease with regards to the authenticity of this hadith. This is what Ibn Uthaymeen would say. فِي الْقَلْبِ مِنْهُ شَيْءٍ. My heart is not comfortable. Something doesn't make sense to me. I can't pinpoint it, but it's not adding up to me. The content, the Islam, everything, it's just not adding up. And mashallah, our Shaykh was a very humble man. He would say, but if the Prophet ﷺ said it, then I believe in it. And this is exactly what I say. The hadith doesn't seem to make sense. But if he said it, amantu billahi wa rasuli. Simple as that. So, we put this hadith of, which hadith guys? Tamim al-Dari. In a footnote. And we have a question mark, and we leave it at that. Allah knows best. I don't know. But mainstream interpretation, Imam al-Nawawi, Ibn Kathir, these scholars, they considered this to be authentic because this is Sahih Muslim.